The rain began on a Thursday evening and settled over the Reed residence like a curtain that refused to rise. It struck the tall glass windows in steady, deliberate sheets, blurring the manicured lawns and quiet street beyond into a watercolor of gray. Inside the house, recessed lighting reflected off polished marble floors, illuminating a space so immaculate it felt staged for a magazine spread. The air carried the faint scent of lemon cleaner mixed with red wine, and nothing about the scene suggested chaos, violence, or death. Everything was in its place. Everything appeared controlled. At 12:17 a.m., Clara Reed's scream tore through that careful stillness. It was sharp, raw, and filled with a kind of disbelief that could not be rehearsed. The sound echoed down the spiral staircase and into the empty kitchen below before dissolving into the pounding rain outside. No neighbor rushed out. No lights flickered on across the street. The storm swallowed her terror whole, leaving it trapped within the walls of the house. When paramedics arrived 8 minutes later, their red and blue lights splashed violently across the rain-slicked pavement, casting fractured reflections across puddles like broken glass. They entered to find Daniel Reed lying motionless at the base of the staircase. He was 42 years old, a respected architect known for precision and discipline, a man who built structures designed to stand for generations. Now he lay on his back on the cold marble floor, one arm twisted beneath him and the other extended outward as though reaching for help that never came. Blood pooled beneath the back of his head, dark and deliberate, spreading slowly across white stone. Clara knelt beside him, trembling so violently that her teeth chattered despite the warmth of the house. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in uneven black lines, and her hands shook as she clutched at Daniel's shirt, leaving faint red smears across the fabric. She repeated the same sentence over and over, her voice breaking each time as if she were trying to convince herself as much as anyone else. He fell. He must have slipped. It was an accident. The words floated in the air, fragile and desperate. The staircase above them spiraled upward in elegant symmetry, its polished oak railing smooth and unbroken, its iron balusters perfectly aligned. There were no splinters, no cracks, no sign of structural failure. To the first responding officer, the explanation seemed painfully simple. A misstep in the dark, perhaps influenced by wine or fatigue, followed by a fatal impact at the bottom. Tragic, yes. Suspicious, no? He documented the scene carefully, but nothing immediately demanded the weight of a homicide investigation. Daniel's body was transported to the county morgue before sunrise, the rain still falling with relentless consistency. Clara remained seated at the kitchen table wrapped in a gray blanket provided by a paramedic, her eyes distant and unfocused as she answered questions in a subdued monotone. She explained that they had shared a single glass of wine earlier that evening before she went upstairs to bed. She said she must have fallen asleep quickly because she did not remember hearing Daniel come upstairs. The sound that woke her was a heavy thud, unmistakable and unnatural. When he did not return to the bedroom, she went to look for him and found him at the bottom of the stairs. She insisted there had been no argument that night, no tension, no raised voices echoing through the house. Daniel had been happy lately, she said, focused on a new project and excited about an upcoming business opportunity. Their marriage, while not perfect, was stable. They were planning a short vacation in the coming weeks. She spoke carefully, as though each sentence required deliberate effort to construct. The responding officer wrote everything down, nodding sympathetically. Preliminary classification, accidental fall pending autopsy. At 7:45 a.m., under the harsh clarity of fluorescent lights, Dr. Evelyn Carter stood over Daniel Reed's body in the autopsy suite. She had performed thousands of examinations during her career and had learned that death often whispered its truth quietly rather than shouting it. The laceration on the back of Daniel's skull immediately drew her attention. It was deep and circular, with fracture lines radiating outward in a pattern that felt focused rather than chaotic. In her experience, falls down staircases typically produced irregular trauma caused by multiple impacts against edges and surfaces. This wound appeared concentrated, as though inflicted by a single decisive blow. As she continued the examination, she carefully observed the distribution of livor mortis along Daniel's body. The pooling of blood after death had settled prominently along the front of his torso and face rather than along his back. That detail unsettled her. If Daniel had died on his back at the base of the stairs, gravity would have drawn blood downward toward his spine and shoulders. Instead, the evidence suggested he had been face down for a significant period after death before being repositioned. Bodies do not reposition themselves. Someone had moved him. Detective Marcus Hale received Dr. Carter's call just after noon, and her tone alone was enough to sharpen his attention. With 14 years in homicide, he trusted medical examiners more than emotional narratives delivered by grieving spouses. By mid-afternoon, he stood once again inside the Reed residence, studying the staircase with renewed scrutiny. Under forensic lighting, faint diluted streaks of blood shimmered across sections of marble that had clearly been wiped. The cleaning had been thorough, but not perfect. In the kitchen, a half-empty bottle of Bordeaux remained on the counter alongside 2 glasses. Both contained only Daniel's and Clara's fingerprints, and the security system showed no sign of forced entry or unauthorized access. Windows were locked, doors were intact. If someone had harmed Daniel, they had either been invited inside or had access to the house. Hale's gaze lingered on Clara as she recounted her version of events again. Her grief appeared genuine, but he knew that grief and guilt often shared the same mask. The toxicology report added another layer of complication. Daniel's blood contained a high concentration of zolpidem, a prescription sleep medication commonly used for insomnia. The levels were sufficient to cause dizziness, confusion, and impaired motor coordination. Clara confirmed that she had a prescription for the drug, but insisted Daniel did not take sleep aids. She speculated that he may have taken one accidentally, perhaps mistaking it for another medication. However, the dosage detected in his bloodstream suggested more than a single accidental pill. Further forensic examination revealed microscopic flecks of metallic gold paint embedded within the wound on Daniel's scalp. The staircase contained no painted surfaces of that color. However, in Daniel's home office stood a heavy brass sculpture mounted on a painted steel base, gold with subtle black flecks. Laboratory comparison confirmed the paint composition matched the particles found in the wound. The sculpture's surface appeared recently cleaned, and luminol testing revealed faint traces of diluted blood along its lower edge. Confronted with this evidence, Clara's composure began to fracture. She admitted that an argument had occurred in the office earlier that night, sparked by tension she claimed had been building for weeks. According to her revised statement, Daniel had spoken about needing space, about reconsidering aspects of their marriage. In a moment of panic, she pushed him, and he fell backward, striking his head against the sculpture. She described the event as an accident born of fear and emotion. Overwhelmed and terrified of legal consequences, she said she staged the staircase scene to avoid suspicion. The confession seemed to provide closure, but Dr. Carter was not satisfied. A closer review of toxicology results revealed that Daniel's body had begun metabolizing zolpidem hours before death, suggesting voluntary ingestion earlier in the evening rather than sudden drugging during the argument. More significantly, advanced screening detected trace amounts of aconitine, a rare toxin derived from monkshood known to disrupt cardiac rhythm. Though present in small quantities, the compound was sufficient to induce fatal arrhythmia under physical or emotional stress. Examination of Daniel's heart tissue supported this conclusion. There was minimal internal hemorrhaging associated with the head wound, indicating his heart had not been pumping effectively when the blow occurred. In other words, Daniel Reed was likely already dead when he was struck. The trauma to his skull had not killed him. It had been inflicted post-mortem. When Detective Hale presented these findings to Clara, her reaction shifted from defensive to stunned disbelief. She whispered that she had not known he was dead when she struck him and insisted she had only intended to create the appearance of a fall. Under sustained questioning, she revealed that her brother, Ethan Walker, had visited earlier that evening. Security logs confirmed the system had been briefly disarmed using Ethan's access code at 8:12 p.m. Investigation into Ethan's activities uncovered a receipt for monkshood extract purchased 2 days before Daniel's death. Financial records revealed he had been laundering funds through Daniel's architecture firm without Daniel's knowledge. When Daniel discovered discrepancies and confronted him, tensions escalated. The theory formed with chilling clarity. Ethan introduced the toxin into a bottle of wine shared that evening, knowing its delayed but lethal cardiac effects. During a heated discussion in the office, Daniel's heart succumbed to arrhythmia and he collapsed. Ethan fled, leaving Clara to discover her husband's body. Faced with the potential exposure of financial crimes that implicated her as well, she chose to stage the scene rather than report the truth. She struck Daniel's body to create visible trauma, repositioned him at the base of the stairs, cleaned the office, and rehearsed a narrative of tragic accident. She believed grief would shield her from deeper scrutiny. Ethan was arrested within days, confronted with toxicology evidence and financial documentation that dismantled his denials piece by piece. As the investigation unfolded, an additional revelation emerged. Daniel had recently updated his will. In the event of accidental death, his estate would transfer immediately to Clara. If his death were ruled homicide, the estate would be frozen pending investigation. Ethan's plan to silence exposure had instead triggered the very inquiry that destroyed his scheme. In the end, what they initially called an accident unraveled into a complex web of greed, deception, and forensic precision. The staircase had been a carefully arranged lie, designed to simplify a death that was anything but simple. Blood patterns, fracture analysis, toxicology, and microscopic paint flecks told a different story, one that grief alone could not conceal. Daniel Reed did not die from a fall in the dark. He died from poison administered by someone he trusted, and the truth emerged not from emotion, but from science.